Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Drs. Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
Thank you for joining us again, ladies. We're on day 3.
Day 3 of our recording marathon.
Extravaganza. I'm ready for some fun today.
I'm ready to sit down and have a deep conversation with you again.
Exactly. Bring it.
No, I do love it. Actually, it's not been hard. You know, that's testament to one of my favorite things to do is to do these podcasts with you.
Me too.
And yes, it is long. The days are long, but the time is short.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you always say if you're looking for something like to fill your purpose, one of the things is the time passes and you enjoy doing it. You don't realize it.
That's a clue to something that you would love and would want to fulfill your purpose.
Yeah.
Is find those things or remind yourself of those things where the time just flies by, you know?
Yeah, it's true because we started Thursday, Friday, 8-10-hour days of recording, and now it's Saturday and we're doing the same, and I feel good about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're good enough friends. Sorry.
No,
that we ended recording last night and went for a walk and we're still talking. We didn't need to go to separate rooms.
Watched a bad movie.
A terrible movie.
We
a little bit depressed when I went to bed.
But
no.
But yeah, in any case, it was good memories. So, all right. Well, you know, we're talking about dealing with setbacks.
Yeah.
Because not everything in life after kids is unicorns and rainbows, as we know. And a lot of us have things that come along, whether that's an illness, a divorce, God forbid a death, change a job, all sorts of things, or even just, you know, those are the biggest things I can think of. But we're going to just talk about things with your children not going the way that you pictured, or
well, you're reaching
getting
for
older.
a goal.
And
I mean, I don't think anybody sets a goal and decides they're going to do something and does not have a setback.
Right.
I mean, it just happens. It's happened with us in Life After Kids, in our business.
Yes.
Like we get so far and then something comes along and we have a setback, and that's the way life is. So it could be, to your point, a big life event or something drastic, but it could also just be something as simple as I'm really focusing on my health and I would like to lose 10 pounds to feel a little better, and I blew it all weekend.
Right. And got set back.
That's a setback.
Absolutely.
And I can say too, sorry if I'm cutting you off, but just because most of you know by now, if you've listened to us at all, that I've dealt in the past with anxiety, a little bit of OCD and different things. And there's definitely setbacks there. That's not as straight and narrow, you know, because things come up with stress and circumstance and times of the month, whatever. But there can be setbacks there too that you just have to, I hope we get to speak about that, about just pushing through and knowing that if just today happens to be a bad day, that doesn't mean every day is going to be a bad day.
Yeah. The truth of it is that there's nothing that's linear in life.
Exactly.
Everything has got its peaks and valleys.
Absolutely.
And that's another reason why we encourage you. And I think at this point in your life, you're well aware of that, right? You're well aware that setbacks will happen. So when the peaks come along, man, ride that wave. Right? Let yourself enjoy the good times, because we have a tendency as women to delay that gratification. Well, if I just get to this point, if I just lose 5 pounds, I'll be happy. Or if I just get all my kids in my house, I'll be happy. Or if I can just make it to Christmas, I'll be happy, or whatever the thing is. But if today's a good day, man, make sure you're soaking that up.
Well, don't you think also, so we had a recent podcast about living in the get through. So to your point, we do that. But beyond that, of just getting to the next thing and not enjoying where you're at, there's also that piece of feeling guilty, like I don't deserve to enjoy it in the moment. Other people are struggling, or look at the world around me, like who am I to be happy where I am? There's that piece. And then there's also the, I do this all the time. Yeah, but it's not going to stay this way because there's always setbacks. I can't allow myself that shame of, or the fear of it's good now, but that means something. I'm going to be punished because things are good right now. I do that to myself all the time.
I'm so glad you touched on those 2 points, because that sums it up, right? Mm-hmm. The first part is basically comes down to your worthiness and how worthy you feel of good times and good things and love, basically. And I will just say this podcast is more practical on dealing with setbacks. But if it's a worthiness issue and you felt that, well, I don't deserve this, right? It all comes down to how much you love yourself. You have to give yourself that gift before you can get that gift from others.
Yeah.
And you're worthy just because you exist to who you are. It's not what you do. It's not what you accomplish. It's because you were built as such a unique person with a set of talents. Even if you don't know what they are, I promise you there's something that you do in a special way that no one else in the entire world 100%. Can do that way. So we're here to remind you of that and just your worthiness. But the second piece, being anxious and always kind of being a couple steps ahead. I think those people that are futuristic tend to live in there, and you think, okay, well, this is the present, but we know what could come down the pipe, right? The shoe could drop.
Right.
It's that whole thing. Or I think it's Brene Brown that says, you're, as a mom, she gives a great example, and you go in to look over the crib of your beautiful sleeping infant, and then you just have all of these horrible images of what could go wrong. How could it go wrong? She calls it you're dress rehearsing for tragedy. Mm-hmm. I think that we think in some ways that that's a little bit of a survival mechanism, we could somehow prepare ourselves for that bad thing we know is possible. If we prepare for it and we think through it, it's a little bit what we do in our brains to when we store memories when we are in stress. Right? So that we can
punish
use
ourselves
that
a little bit.
We could use, and it's almost like a midbrain thing without getting too crazy, but that's a cycle, that's a physiological healthy response for you to capture these thoughts, and your brain at some point thinks it could protect it. But we have to override that. We're human beings, and we have this amazing other brain above our midbrain.
Right.
I got very nerdy there for
No, that's
2
okay.
minutes.
I love when you bring that, because I think there are people listening that probably want to hear that too.
But, if you're that person and you're looking over the crib and you're like, what's wrong with me? Why am I thinking these things,
Well, hey, you might be an Enneagram 6.
You could be. Right. And we see that with our 6 friends, and you're one of them. But also it's I guess it's a way to release that so that you can relax into the good times.
Yeah, I know, it's particularly an Enneagram 6, and probably many of us do this. And by the way, lots of people say that Enneagram 6 is probably the most common number. But you do that dress rehearsal, so you're always thinking and in your thoughts, but it's unproductive because you're thinking of everything that could go wrong, but it's a protective mechanism because you want control, and if you think about it enough, you're prepared for it if it does happen.
I know.
So that's kind of like a subconscious thing. But I also do think that it's just a little bit of we don't deserve it.
Yeah.
And isn't it so funny how we, our mindsets, how we like to approach the world, you and I? This podcast is supposed to be about handling setbacks, and we went right to enjoy the good things in your life. It's like we're fighting the talking about setbacks.
Right. But
did you notice we just did that?
But that is a way to handle setbacks, to look at the silver lining and to stay in the positive. So
you're right. And you can, yes, okay. I see that perspective. That gives me fresh perspective on it too. And on top of that, then when there are setbacks, choosing to see the positives is what you're saying, allowing yourself to be happy in the positive, but also when there's a setback, and I'm sure you're going to get to this, so I'm probably stealing your thunder, but gratitude practices. Can you look around and see what is going right?
Love that. So let's talk about it. How to deal with this. If this is you, if you're in that low valley right now, just first thing I think is just to acknowledge your feelings, right? So many of us might work too much to push through it. We might dive ourselves into our family. We might just push it aside. And I think we all can do that to a certain extent. But first of all, if you're feeling pretty shitty or crummy today, just look at that and acknowledge it. I think give that a moment.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you're not going to stay there, but there's something very powerful in just looking at your feelings and stopping and saying, I just feel like crud today. Mm-hmm. And it's because this is happening.
Right.
XYZ.
Yeah, that's a far better approach than just trying to push it off and stifle it. Allowing yourself to feel that way and maybe examining it a bit.
Yeah, I think it brings some self-awareness, and it's sort of like step zero, right?
Yeah.
To just know, like, sometimes we just have this sense of like something's not right, but we haven't examined it, to use your word, and then we can take it out on our family. We can yell at our husbands. We can hit the horn a little longer than normal on the drive to work.
Swear at the person in the car.
Yeah. So I think by acknowledging those feelings and like stopping for a minute and going, oh, this is happening and this sucks, that it may prevent you from sort of pushing those feelings, what's the word? Redirecting or misdirecting those feelings onto people who don't deserve it.
And I think you do a very good job of this. Not misdirecting your feelings, but like you, maybe it's because of that analyzer in you, but like I think that you do a very good job of taking a step back and where is this coming from for me right now? I see how the path that I'm going down, and why am I feeling this way?
Well, and
I've seen you put that in action.
That's a piece of just knowing yourself, right? So the good news is we don't have to have everything all figured out.
Yes.
But at this phase in our life, but we do have to know ourselves pretty well.
Right.
And when you can know some of those really core issues like that, I know if I'm having a bad day that I need to go and just sit and think, because I am an analyzer and I am at my best when I have some time to process what's happening.
Yeah.
My thoughts.
Yeah.
For you might be at your best. You're processing that, you're thinking about it, but you need to do something about it. Right?
Yes.
So those are your practices that you do every day.
Right.
You take action, you say your affirmations, you move your body. Yeah. You feel at your best when you are doing some things to help your overall emotional resilience.
That's so true. So we're talking about, and we've talked about this before, so if you've been listening, you probably have heard us, but the 4 types of moms from the Purpose Quiz. Dr. Lynn is an awesome analyzer. I'm a diligent doer. So I was going to say, but here's the other flip side of that for a diligent doer, if you're listening and you are one. Because Kent, my husband, has seen me do this. When I'm like overwhelmed or something is bothering me, I can repress it and not deal with it by having a lengthy to-do list and just keeping myself busy so that I don't have to think about it. That's definitely a protective mechanism for me.
So it works as both ways.
It can be a bad thing, but then to your point, I very much am, and I've put this on my kids, like, okay, you've got a problem, so how are we going to fix it? Yeah. Like, you can either sit here and think about it and dwell on it and be upset, or we can decide what actions we're going to take to get over it.
And I think it's the way to get to solving. So the really cool thing about that is it's the path. That knowing that type of mom you are illuminates the path for you to get through to setbacks. So stay with me for just a second.
Yeah, please.
For me, giving myself enough time to literally sit in a corner and let my thoughts come together on it, have enough time to analyze all of the information that I received to that point regarding that problem, I will find my solution.
Yeah.
Okay? For you, giving yourself enough time to do the things and find the combination of the things that will get you to that place will get you to that solution.
Yeah.
So isn't that interesting?
It's so interesting. And then I imagine with a remarkable relator, they're going to be the one that wants some advice or wants to be talking to their friends.
They need to connect to enough people, the right people, and feel connected, relating to find their solution.
Yeah.
Relating along the way. And then we might as well pull out the influencers too. Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know. I was sitting here thinking that in my mind.
So I'm coming up with these, but I mean, you would agree, right? They're pretty aligned with what I've said.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with influencers, so the biggest thing with them is they get things done by speaking up, by being heard, by commanding, by moving others towards something. So if they're dealing with a setback, they would need to rally enough things, people, and communicate it enough to find their solution, find their way through.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little bit more esoteric for them.
Yeah. And I also think that, I mean, I'm using Kenny as our example.
Yeah.
My husband, who is an influencer.
Maybe it's just talking it out for them.
I think
that came up because you brought up
Kenny. He likes to talk. He likes to talk a lot. Some people say he talks too much. I hope he's not out there in the kitchen listening. Anyway, what I was going to say is I imagine it, but maybe it's not because Kenny is an influencer as much as, which is would be a magnificent motivator if you've taken the quiz, right?
Yes. Oh, thank you.
So maybe it's that, but maybe I'm also pulling because he's an 8. But I imagine that motivators probably don't feel the setbacks as much. Like, he's just powering through. He gets himself he's just
sees it as par for the course, and it's just a time to pull people along a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Interesting. Love that.
It's probably easier for them to pull themselves along, would be my guess too.
That's
right?
That's a neat conversation. That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's not where we're going, but it's always fun because I think most women in our community have taken the quiz, and if you haven't, please do, because a lot of times we'll hop on these podcasts. We don't have these scripted or planned out. So you and I start talking, and very often it does come back to these 4 different tendencies. So
yes, because you can make sense of things like setbacks, things like relationships, things like your purpose through the lens of knowing how you're wired generally. Like that's literally how I see the world and see things when it comes to people in many cases. So Step 0, acknowledge your feelings. Step 1, you have to prepare and expect discomfort and pain. So if you're in this, again, this is just like, hey, this is obvious, but if you can actually go through these steps and not skip one, I would say don't skip that, because if you know going into something, this sucks, this is going to be painful, this is going to be hard, and you tell yourself and you prepare yourself for that, you will actually be a lot more resilient as you're going through it, because you know it's gonna suck.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense? Versus you not stopping and going, oh yeah, maybe we can just skirt through this, you know? And then the shit hits the fan, proverbially.
Right.
And then you're like, bah, and
you fall apart because you haven't prepared yourself. And this is gonna suck as a harsh word, because sometimes it's just, there's gonna be added stress or extra work, or you're going to have to buckle down. Like, I could use the example for you. Last summer, I remember Anthony was graduating, and you all came in to celebrate with us, which was amazing. And you and I were like ramping up life after kids. You're also running your big wellness business with your husband in the Midwest, and you had some employee issues. And what happens when you have your own business, if you have an employee issue, you have to step up for the employee, and you were beside yourself. But I was also watching you in those moments, preparing yourself. And you said to me after you pulled yourself around, like, I just have to know that this summer is not going to be the way I anticipate it. It's going to be kind of crappy. It's going to suck at points. I'm going to have to work harder than I wanted to. I might have to take some things off my plate with life after kids. But you had yourself prepared, and guess what? You went through the summer, and you had a good summer.
We did. Yep.
But that was definitely a setback.
Yes. But if I had just kind of whined about it and thought, which I have a tendency to do sometimes, with when it comes to employees, but if I had whined about it and just was like, okay, well, we're just gonna make it a great summer no matter what. Like, I think that would have been a different outcome, because I would have been marinating in the fact that what I was expecting wasn't what it looked like.
Right. Or if you had been like silver lining, or if I had been even saying to you, it's going to be fine, it's going to be great, it's not that bad, and then you get there and it really is as bad as you thought, now you're disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is one of those places where it's almost like prepare yourself for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
When you're in a setback, just in the middle of it. Yep. All right. Step 2. This is where, once you kind of get through that, you acknowledge it, you know it's going to be hard. And so this is as you're going along. This kind of happens a little bit later in the process. But along the way, at some point, and the sooner you do this, the better, you need to try to find the silver lining in it. Mm-hmm. Right? That's when you start to speak positive words. So whatever that might be. So we'll use the example of me. We had an opportunity to restructure some roles, and get some fresh new perspectives in there with new people. And that was a silver lining. And I had to just focus on that and tie back to that.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I give the example too of
Please.
Anthony here, because that's a really good example. And we talked about him in another podcast. My oldest son, he went to college last year and ended up not happy at the school he was at for a variety of reasons. And when at the end of the year, I knew he was having some issues early on. The end of the year when we circled back and he was like, I'm definitely not staying. Like, I'm transferring, and we thought through this. And I shared on that podcast that we talked through this a little bit deeper. Like, when I had like an hour and a half long phone conversation walking him through like all of the points, contradictory points, or like pros and cons, or had you thought this through? And he had reframed it for himself. He was like, you know what? I could look at this like, and I think this is important for us to hear as moms with our kids when we look at our kids too. He's like, I could look at it like I wasted a whole year. I had a year where I was at a place I didn't like. I have to start all over again. I have to go somewhere new. He goes, but really, he's like, what's happened for me is I've had a whole year to grow, to learn. I know now exactly what I want. I know what I don't want. And I feel like that's a huge win.
Love it.
See, so he's taking a setback and reframing it in a positive way. I actually think Ken and I do that quite a bit, even in this process
you guys
with him,
are great at that.
of like trying to figure out where he's going to land in one school that he really hoped he got to. Then we were getting calls that it's not going to happen. And we're like, yeah, but you know what? Here's why this is great. Like, you just have to sometimes reframe it.
See the positive. I think as you were talking, I thought, because, you know, the older you get, the more important this becomes. So it's so really amazing that he has that at a young age and you guys have modeled that for him. But I think for you guys listening, the sooner you reframe that in that setback, as soon as you can pivot it and really tie into it, it's not just a giving a lip service. It's not just like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to see that this is better.
Yeah.
You know, you're saying, oh, this is so great. But inside you're like,
yeah.
You actually have to really tie to that positive silver lining. The sooner in that setback that you do that, and that really is a muscle. I think that the more you do that, the easier it becomes. The more setbacks you go through, the easier those muscles, the more those muscles grow. But that is the recipe for a more resilient person. Wouldn't you agree?
Right.
Because as soon as you reframe that, then you can get to the work of just getting through it, seeing where you're going, and then knowing that it's all going to work out way better.
And I have, you know, there's that adage of when one door closes, another opens, or door closes and a window opens, or whatever you want to say there. Kenny and I both, I think, have lived our life like that. That if you have a setback or something closes that you were hoping for, whatever it is, it's because there's something else coming along. It wasn't the right thing for you, right? Like, if you can live your life by everything happens for a reason. For me, in the Christian faith, I know that God works everything for our good. And there's scripture that says that it's not just the good things for your good, it's everything for your good. So I know and believe like wholeheartedly that whatever is happening for a good reason, even if I don't see it in the moment.
Absolutely. So it's adopting that mindset too. That's really that's transformational. That will transform a life right there. That's just that one thing.
Right.
You know,
and that's specifically for, you know, things that are out of your control. Sometimes we have setbacks, like I use that example of if you're wanting to get healthy and maybe try to take off a couple pounds or eat better and you have a weekend where you screwed up, that's in your control. You might have to handle that a little differently. You're not saying there, like, I think that's pretty obvious, but just in case. Everything happens for a reason. So
I eat those Cheetos for a very special reason.
Right. Like, the point is there are different setbacks.
Yeah.
Right.
That's great. Well, and that leads into step 3, which is you may have to, and this might be the hardest one for a lot of people. So really check yourself on this. You may have to accept advice on where you went wrong. And not may have to, I actually have written here, accept advice on where you went wrong. Resist the urge to be defensive. So that's what all of us want to do right away, right? Because we're going to have the people, and actually it's the people who will come up to you and probably like hesitate, but they kind of saw where you went wrong and they want to tell you, but they're afraid because they're not sure how you're going to receive it, right? So ask for advice. Ask the people that you know that really actually care about you, that aren't going to just say something that's self-serving to them or just sugar-coated just to You're fine. You did great. Go to the people that you know that will tell the truth and level with you, and accept that advice on where you went wrong, because a setback is only a setback if we don't learn from it. Otherwise, it's just a part of our journey. It's a
win.
Place we had to get to. It can become a win. It's a place we had to get to in order to get to where we're going.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Now, if you lived in a house with Ken Stillwell, you'd have a lot of practice at taking advice of where you went wrong.
Oh, believe me, I get that plenty from my husband
and
too.
Not because,
and vice versa, to be honest.
Yes, and not like a nitpicky, well, not always pointing out what I do wrong, but like he has very little tolerance for like, have definitely been times where I'm like, I just want like, it's going to be okay.
Reassurance.
A hug, like reassurance, some like lovey-dovey. And he's always, I think it's because he's an 8, like, listen, you screwed up. How are you going to fix it next time? Like, if you hadn't done this, and this, you probably wouldn't be here right now.
So you go to your dogs for a hug, and you go to your husband for
the hard
what you needed to hear. That's just how you see it.
Yeah.
All right, and then finally here I have take care of yourself. If you're in the middle of a setback,
I was hoping you were going
this is going to be the last thing that you want to do, because sometimes we feel like that's a very tempting time to self-punish. Mm-hmm. Because we've put ourselves in this place. Either it's a worthiness issue, and I personally, I think everything comes down to that, like how you see yourself, how you feel about yourself, how worthy you feel that you are to have the good things. And sometimes we do self-sabotage, and that's what our quote unquote setback has led us to, right? But if you're listening to this, you are getting to those healthy places where you can start to rise above that. And that the first place to go with that is self-care. It's to take care of yourself, because that is showing yourself the love that you deserve, despite the setback. Because it's the thing that went wrong. You are not wrong. You are not bad. So take care of yourself.
And even if you had something to do with it, there are setbacks that happen that are out of our control. There are setbacks that we bring on. I mean, for sure. But I think, to your point, still be gentle with yourself and gracious with yourself. I mean, I think you don't want to turn a blind eye to what you did to lead to it, because you won't learn from it and do better the next time. But you also don't want to walk in guilt or shame or unforgiveness to yourself. So you still need to, because none of us are perfect. We're all going to do the wrong thing very often. And sometimes that's going to lead to a setback. And you still have to, in the midst of that, give yourself a little bit of love and tenderness. And hopefully your kids and your family and people you love around you, you're teaching them to do the same thing, because you're seeing them do that. And once again, that doesn't mean that you're ignoring it.
No.
Or just like the worst thing I think you could do in a setback, if you were part of the cause, is to just be like, we all know these people. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. But we'll never like acknowledge or take the bait. They're not self-aware enough to see how they played a part in it. Because that's a tough thing. When you become self-aware enough to look at a setback or a situation in your life and see that you may have been part of the cause, then you have to do something about it.
Yes.
It's sometimes far easier to put your head in the sand.
Right. The point of seeing your role and how you played into it, accepting that advice for people that point out to you, is that it gives you a sense of control. Right. And it helps you hold on to your power in a situation that's going wrong.
Right. I 100% agree. And it allows you to do better next time. And to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, so back to the self-care, just the first thing is not missing sleep. I know in times of stress, all I want to eat are all the carby things, but you might have to give yourself a pass for eating not perfectly, right? Because sometimes that can be a little bit of a loving behavior in the sense that like, I just need something right now, but keep a midline to where you're not also being self-destructive, right? Not thinking good thoughts is a destructive pattern when you're in a setback. And a loving self-care would be to kind of turn that around, stay in that positive, stay in that silver lining.
Right.
And that, again, it's not something you're born with knowing how to do. It's literally just a habit, a practice of just when a bad thought comes in, catch yourself thinking it, shift that out, and replace it with the alternative.
And the more you practice that, the easier it becomes.
The more you practice that, the easier it comes. It's just like any muscle in our body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just allow yourself to feel that compassion and love for yourself. I think it can be a time of self-punishing or blame.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to blame yourself. You want to see where maybe you could have done better, but separate that from the person that you are. That's a thing you did. It was a choice. It was a behavior. It does not take away from your worth, from your love, self-love, from who you are and your value as a person and a mom and a woman.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So we need to, in the midst of setbacks, whether it's something that you led to the setback or it was a setback that's out of your control in some way, there are various ranges of intensity of setbacks. Some are smaller, some are bigger. So
great way to say that.
We have to look at them all, some things we handle differently than others. But as a general rule of thumb, we need to acknowledge it, reframe it.
First, we accept that it's going to be painful.
Yes. Acknowledge it, accept and know that it's going to be painful as you walk through it.
Find the silver lining, reframe
Find the silver lining or reframe it, positive mindset.
Seek out advice and accept advice.
And accept the advice
of good people that know you on where you might have gone wrong, and take better care of yourself.
And love yourself in the midst of it.
Love yourself.
And forgive yourself. And if somebody else had a hand in it, do your best to forgive them too.
That's so great.
Yeah, that's a good place to end.
Love it.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I always love talking to you about these things.
I know. These are this is how we learn about each other.
I know.
I think every
time I get on this podcast, I learn a little something more either about you or myself or both.
I hope that for you too. If you're listening, that's our one and only goal.
Same. Ladies, make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. The website is www.lifeafterkids.com. You can find all of our resources there. We've mentioned the purpose quiz a couple times in this podcast. I'll link it in the show notes, but you can also find that on our website. Big turquoise blue button up on the top right that says take the purpose quiz. It's always a pleasure to have you here. DM us, reach out, let us know how you're doing. Let us know what you want to hear about. We answer everything personally. Have a great day and an even better week.
Big hugs to you.